Hey guys, if you hear any weird breathing or anything like that, having allergy issues, I still recorded the video so you'll hear me breathe in a little bit more than I normally would. It's because my nose is a little stuffed up. I do apologize for that. Next time I'll try to get the recordings done before that happens, so you'll hear a little bit of the voiceover for it and then you'll jump into the video. Like I said, try to ignore it and I'll try to find a way to fix it for the next one. Thanks. Alright, so thanks for checking out the coloring portion of this. I've already flatted the image just because I don't think anyone really needs to watch me do that. I haven't quite perfected how I like to color. I'm just going to show you how I do it, and then I'm still looking to see if there's a way to improve some of it. But once I flatten the image, I will duplicate the flat layer, and then I'll set it to screen or add mode, and it will look like this. Then what I do is I'll select whatever brush I want to, and I'll just select this from the for the colors, just the transparency, and then I'll just erase away where the lights, the shadows should be. So my light source is up here. I'll make this brush a little bit bigger. I'll zoom in a little bit, and I'll just erase away where the shadow should be. So I'll go in here. I know this part here will be, you said the light source was over here in the other video. So this is going to be in shadow. To me, underneath here will get a little bit, under the eye gets some, under the nose gets a shadow, under the chin gets one, and sometimes I'll use a pencil brush like this just because it adds a bit of texture, and if I don't like that, I can always use the inking brush that I use, just because it'll give me slightly smoother lines, and I can add in harder shadows or softer shadows, just depending on what I'm looking for. So I think we'll do the face with the pencil brush because it just makes it a little bit um, easier on it. Just gives it a little bit softer look because it's a face. And for the hair, we'll do something similar. So light source is up here. So for this, we're just going to come in and actually we'll use this one instead. We'll make this a little bit bigger. And I'm just going to add in the shadows for where the hair should be, which will be pretty much over all the way down here. I don't over render the hair if I can help it for blonde hair. I just find it looks off-putting. When it's somebody who has, let's say, really dark hair, I might, but with blonde hair, I find the least amount of work or the less lines you add to it, the better it looks. So, there we go. Just like with white, you're not going to see me do a lot of inking, same concept. Just like once we have the basic shadowing in for the hair, we'll add a little bit more in here. Go. Now, if you wanted to, it's here, so we'll drop the shadow in here as well. And we'll add that cast shadow. And then to see if it looks right, just turn off the line work for it. So as you can see where the light source is coming from, because that's how I like to do the color. Now, once I've erased some of it, or erased so much of it back, I'll probably go in and do a few other things with it. Like I'll determine if I need to add a glow effect or anything like that, but again, because the light source is coming from over here, we're going to get a cast shadow in here. This is just a sphere, so we're just going to shade it in like this. So it's mostly, you're adding the shadows, it's mostly just figuring out what shapes they should be. In this case, this should cast a shadow underneath here and here. This should go to here. Just add it in nice and like this. And then if I want to, I'll also add a little bit in here. The black is essentially, this is essentially spotting black for this. And I'll probably end up doing another pass for the shadows, just because to me, That didn't quite look right. To me, the spotting color as black works really well. It just requires a bit of practice. Because again, this is a cylinder shape. The light source is here. You also have to have a cast shadow, which should be about here. Some of the anatomy comes into play when you're doing shadows, and you have cast shadows. So, and sometimes just doing something that looks cool does the trick too. For me, I'm gonna do another hard shadow for this. I know in here is going to be a cast shadow. I also know that from here to here, I would say even up into here should be in shadow. So we're just gonna go in and do this out. But again, this is why I do it this way with the overlay and just erasing it. It just makes it a little bit faster. You don't have to worry about color theory too much. You don't have to worry about um, guessing at this or that. You're just focusing on placing the shadows in the right places. So I'm just going to bring this down here. To me, this whole stomach area and this arm will be mostly in shadow. So what I would do, instead of doing all that, I would just turn that pencil layer off and grab the lasso tool and just drop that in. It's just faster. Speeds up the process, and then you can always clean it up a little bit later. So we'll go back into here, and then you can just add in a bit more shadow to it. And same thing, like this whole hand is just going to be in shadow. So the advantage of doing it like that is you don't have to change colors. I find it looks a little bit better than just doing it with the purple. I've tried that before too. You just select purple and do and place the shadows that way. But then you always have to make adjustments to it, to go into the control U and make a lot of color adjustments. With this, if you don't think it's dark enough, all you have to do is go to the flats layer, when I'll show you that later. But if you just go into the flats and hit control U, you can just make it a little darker and it'll give you a bit more contrast. But we'll do that when we get to it. That'll probably be done after we place down the bulk of the shadows. But like I said, getting through the coloring process isn't too bad as long as you just take your time with the shapes. The shapes really, you have to adjust them a little bit as you see fit and what you think looks correct. You can reference everything too. There's nothing wrong with that. I just find knowing that where the highlight or where the sunlight is or the highlighted area should be helps a lot with this. Like I know this is going to be all in shadow because of the angle of where it is. Everything's just going to be in a shadow because this part of the body is in front of it. Now the leg, like the boot, probably would come down somewhat like this, and then I'd cast the shadow. Now, what I can also do is do a second shadow pass and really almost make it black, spot it in as black. Like I would do something like this for the boot area, cut the shadow in here, and then maybe do something like this, and then rotate it, and then you can select a smaller brush and go in and just do nice light feathering lines just like you would with inking. Then you can grab the paint bucket and just drop the shadows in that you're looking for. Then you can go back in and just add in the feathering lines on making adjustments for how big or small you need them to be, and just go in with it so that you know where it's feathering back to. Just take your time with it. If you don't like how it looks, you can always just undo it. Let's see. There we go. I didn't quite like how that looks or the shape of it. I might try it with the brush that does this. Sometimes that works a little bit better. So we'll set it to about 17 and see how it looks. Yeah, works a little bit better because it's what it's designed to do. Sometimes it's easier to just use the brush you've created for it, and other times it's nice to kind of sort of play around with it a little bit. It works well with hair too, because then you can just kind of make it a little bit bigger and then just add in little feather lines like this. Just adds a little bit of texture to it. Uh, let's see, add this down here. Yeah, it works a little bit like that. Works out okay as long as you don't overdo it. So now we'll jump back into my ink one. Again, light source is here, so this part of the leg will be in shadow. Make this brush a little bit bigger again. This is again like me spotting black. That's how I try to treat the coloring portion depending on the character. I like to try and get enough of it so that it looks like it should. Sometimes you want it to have where it makes sense visually. Sometimes what'll happen is you'll make a line and you just don't quite like it, just to erase it or undo it and try it again. Like to me, the light source is over here. I would probably drop a shadow in right there because it's turning away from the light source like a cylinder would. So to me, that should probably do the trick for that. We'll add a little bit in here. There we go. And we'll do the same thing with this arm. This is all going to be in shadow. This should all be in shadow around the thumb area. Add a little bit in for this. And this is when you can start to add in texture and stuff like that to the gloves. So don't be afraid to treat your placing of shadows like you would for inks. I think sometimes people do really clean, smooth inks, but they can't get the texture that they're looking for. So don't be afraid to add in a few loose strands like this, just because it adds texture. She's wearing like leather gloves, so they should have some form of texture to it. Go. Texture is a big part of certain costumes and suits, at least to me anyway. And to add on to it, just add in a little shape like that. We have that part done. We'll add a little bit in here because the cape is overlapping it, creates a cast shadow for it. So right now I'm doing cast shadows and I'm doing the big shadows all at once. Because to me, the suit should have texture as well, so I'm just adding it in just like I would if I was spotting ink. So I'm just adding in little bits and adding enough to it. Sometimes it's why I don't really ink it. I just add in some feathering lines like that. I'll clean up in here a little bit. Just, there we go. So we'll add that here. Add a little bit here. And we'll do the same thing with this. I'm pretty sure that this is like a metal material, so for something like that, you want to put so much into it and then add little darker lines like this. And it just gives it a metallic feel if you add in little squares to it instead of um, adding it as like one band and then just adding the shadow to it. Just adds a little bit more interest. So now if we zoom out, and we're almost done, we haven't done the cape yet, but if we turn the line work off for it, it looks well shaded. You can tell where the light source is. We turn all of it off. You can tell light source is top right. It's going over to here, and that's why the shadows look like that. Now the other thing we're going to do really quickly before I forget is I'm going to do a color hold for the hair. So I'm going to select the default color, make it a bit more orangey, and I'm going to change the layer to multiply. Well, before I do that, we'll duplicate it, and we'll lock that one, and we'll toss it into this folder just so it's out of the way. But if you click lock to transparent pixels, you can just go in and hit Control U and select the hair and drop in the color hold and then set it to multiply just so it pops up a little bit. It's easier to find with blonde hair. I don't like the black lines, so I mostly will go in with a color hold for it. I don't do it for most hair because black works really well for it, but blonde hair is something that you really have to nail, otherwise it looks yellow instead of blonde. And if you add too much shadow to it or too much black to it, it looks really muddy. So I try to keep it really simple and to the point. Like in this case, it's blonde hair. I have a color hold. I used an orangey yellow color to it and just set it to multiply. Now, the rest of the lines, like even if I take off the line of some of the feathering that we have in here, the colors still hold up without it. It just adds extra texture in around here, under the chest and things of that nature. So now we'll go back down to this brush down here, and we'll just add a little bit of texturing in here. Because it's a good idea to have it, and I like to do it at the color stage. Primarily because I don't mind inks, and I think it has its place in certain colors, but I've also always found that certain characters you could do with or without the ink, and they would still look just like they should. I think Batman needs a really solid inker, not so much a solid colorer. And I think that somebody like Spider-Man, for instance, depending on the story, you can get away with a really, really good colorist who could do what I'm doing right now instead, and he would still look really, really interesting. I think the idea is that you want a balance for both, and sometimes uh, that balance gets missed, will get mixed instead. Sometimes that balance will get just a little bit out of hand with it, and people get mad because it doesn't quite look how they want it to. There we go. We can even soft erase some of it back for in through here. It adds just a little bit of texture to the skin because it's still coming away from it. You just grab a soft eraser and do it like that. It just adds a bit more interest to what's going on. And then again, once you get so much of it done, zoom back out to what people will actually see and then turn off the line work to see how it's looking. Now, somewhere when I was dropping in flats, I accidentally changed the color, but it still looks correct. You can still see the hair stands out without the line work. It just doesn't have the detail, but visually it looks correct. So for me, the only thing I got left to do is the cape. We'll probably speed through that part of it, and then we'll do the final touch-ups for the character. Color, like I said, like I haven't quite perfected it. I feel like I'm pretty close to how I want colors to look and how I like to render with color. But again, the next part of the video will be sped up for the cape, just because it's just going to be really quick, and then we'll jump back in with some of the fine details, like adding little bits of makeup, and I'll show you how I do the eyes too, because I don't pencil in the eyes, I just do it with color because it's just easier at this scale. Alright, so we got through the cape, the eyes are done. So now what I'm going to do is add, I think people would call it like special effects. It's just adding a little bit of makeup. So I'm just going to make a new layer. We're going to select the airbrush, and we're going to select a peachy pink color for it. There we go. So something around there. And we'll go into the face area and we'll just add a little bit. So I like to add a little bit to the cheeks, a little on the nose, a little in and around here. It just adds where where the sun hits the most, where most blood is in the face. I'm gonna add a little bit onto the chest area. I'll add a nice little bit of interest, and we'll do the same thing on the leg, just because it's in like direct sunlight. So add just a little bit. Just adds a bit more color to her. Just gives her a better overall look. Now we'll hit Control on the keyboard and select that area. Make sure this is working. And we'll do a new layer. And this is when I would add just a little bit more of a pinkish look. It would mostly be in and around the leg. And we could do it as add glow. We could do it as overlay. We'll do it as add glow effect. And then we'll do a little bit of white with it on the leg. In this section here, just a little too much. And we'll just grab a general brush and just add just a little bit of white in and around where it should hit the most. Just adds a little bit more interest in that area of the face. Add a little bit into the cheeks where we have it, and we'll also do it in on here for that metal area here. We can add add glow effects and add just a touch of it like this. Actually, we'll do that on its own layer just so I can adjust it. I'm actually going to select the default color for it, and we're going to select it as overlay, and we'll just add a little bit to it. Don't want it to be too much, and add just a bit more. We'll do new layer for add glow, and we can turn the brush down a little bit, just add here to here. This way it just gives it a bit of shine to it. You can even do it like little bits here and there, like little reflection style lights. It's because it should hit in some of the different parts of the metal. Let's see. I do the same thing right about here, and a little bit there. It just gives it a bit more of a shine look to it. So now what we have to decide is if the colors are working or if they're dark enough. It doesn't look too bad, or could you use a second shadow pass? So for me, if I was going to do another shadow pass, this is where this comes in handy. Because if I want to, I can just go into, there we go. I can just go into the default flats and go into Control U. A second here. If I want it to be just a little bit darker, and you can just play around with the saturation hue. So if you do that, changes the color, it adds a bit more pinkish. Like that looks a little bit better. And then you could just adjust the luminosity. You do a whole bunch of different stuff in here. Usually, I find just adjusting the hue a little bit makes it a little bit more interesting. Sometimes, depending on the costume, a bit more or a bit less for luminosity does the trick too. So if we leave it like that, it looks a little bit grayer on the side, so you could adjust the hue and saturation even more. You just got to play around with it until you find what you like. I'm just going to adjust it to make it just a bit more reddish because I find it looks better for the skin and it brightens it up a little bit. Let's try 15, see what it looks like. 15 is not too bad. About 5 for that. So that looks a little bit different. So this is the before. So what it looks like before, and that's what it looks like there. So just that little change gives it a bit more color to it. What I would normally suggest, which is what I'm going to do before we play around with it, is always duplicate the colors, the flat layers. That way, if you change something and you end up not liking it, you have the default one to go back to. So we're just going to adjust this back down to about right about there. I think that's not too bad. And then what we'll do is we'll do a next layer of shadows. So for the shadows, um, we have a couple options for it. I think under the cape could use a bit more shadow. I think this leg could be maybe a bit darker. Small cast shadows is what I'm thinking of for it. So you get a little bit more in the stomach area and a little bit under the cape where the body is in front. So for that, you have a few options. If you have environment, like she's outside at a beach or at a bright summer day, sun shining, you can make the shadows like blue or even like a bluish purple color in terms of the sky, and the highlights or the light source would be the sun, so it would be like an orangey yellow color, which you can actually do both of those with like a quick soft airbrush tool. You add in a little bit of red to the side of it, which we might do at the end just to add a little bit more pop. So because we're going to use something like this for the warm color, I would just go right across the color wheel and select something like this for the shadows. And because I don't want to go looking for it again later, I just toss it in the mixing palette. So I can do that. And then if I want to, we can just go in and check this here out and see how it looks. So just going to make this brush a little bit bigger. Because what it'll do is we're essentially replacing spotted blacks like we did here with these shadows over here. So I'm just going to select this and select this. Hopefully that works. There we go. And now we're just spilling it. This way it just keeps it nice and clean. I can see what it looks like without making a mess. So you can add this in here. So we'll drop this in here. It gives us the outline for what the body is doing in front. And then we can pull some of these shadow lines right to here. We can add another cast shadow from here straight into here. And now if we want to, we can play around with the feathering tool a little bit. Add in shapes like that. We can add this in here. We can do the same thing with this. Just gives it a bit more dynamics. So we'll see how that's looking. If we need anything else to do with it. Just want to get this shape in here. Alright. You can even make it fully dark like that if you wanted to. I just want to drop brush size a little bit and bring right size and bring this right to here. So that would work for that. To me, we'll check out what it looks like in here because this is all in shadow because the body is behind and is in front of this urn. So it should be really pushed to the back. And this just kind of helps with that. Instead of spotting it as black, you just do it with color. Color works really well for this kind of stuff. Sometimes sometimes it'll look a little off, but it does help a lot with it. So now you get a little bit more 3 dimensions, a bit more detailing in with that hand. We can do the same thing in here. We can make this darker, just makes it so it pops just a little bit because we didn't add uh, blacks to it. The abs is a perfect place to do it because then you can kind of cut out what you need, and you can also drop in the shadows for underneath, in this case your chest area. So you can add this here. You can then drop in where the abs would be. I do think you would see a little bit of it, and now we'll just turn off the layers for just to see how it looks. We can drop this here. Just helps to add in a bit more intrigue, which is what you're looking for, is to get it to pop just a little bit. Now, if we want to, we can now, what we would do with inks is do the rendering area in and around the abs. So we'll just, we can now do stuff like this with it, and it pops really, really well. Adds a lot of texture to the suit. You can even do it like this. The idea is it's just to add texture to the suit. I find, at least for me, when I do colors, I always ran into the problem that it always looked too mushy, like there was no texture, it was too smooth. And that just kind of fixes that for me. So give it a try and see if it helps with yours as well. Probably darken in some of the stitching. We'll also cut this here in a bit more shadow. This is where you just kind of have fun with it, because you've done most of the leg work. There we go. And you've done most of the leg work with your initial shadow pass. So I would bring this whole leg in shadow. What's that paint bucket tool? There we go. So you could do that, and you could also do a little bit in through here, just because the shoe is right there too. The idea, like I said, is to just try to get it to pop a little bit. We can also now go in here and add in some of that rendering for the leg, and we'll see how it looks. If we don't like it, we can always erase it. I always go in a little extra heavy with it because it's easy to erase it if I don't like it. So this place here is added in where the creases are. We can add a little bit there. That's a little too much. Just want to get the shape right. Up here. There we go. So we have this part just about right. I would drop in a little bit more shadow where the knee is. Bring that down into here. Just add a bit more texture, a bit more contrast to this. Alright, so that should do the trick for that. To me, I think all through here should be in shadow. Because again, that whole leg is in front of it, but I don't want it to become too much, so what we'll do is we'll zoom out and we'll see how it looks. So that's before, that's after, so we'll turn these all off. That's not bad, so we can just adjust the opacity of it a little bit. It's a little too dark, and that should do the trick for that. And then, again, just go back in and adjust the hue a little bit. So we're at blue, so I think if we go back here a bit more, it'll get more reddish. Let's turn this back up, this, and now let's do it. See how it's getting warmer and cooler as we play around with it. Mostly just want to go in here. Sometimes just doing it with uh, the opacity slider is good enough. You just want it to be subtle. And I think that should do the trick for that. So what I'm going to do now is just add in one final pass for um, a bit of that reddish hue. So we'll make it somewhere in here. We'll select the airbrush. There we go. And we'll just add a little bit here and there. Because it'll add, if we can get this to pop up just enough, I'm just going to make it a bit warmer. Actually, we'll make it a bit more reddish in color. And you can put it on, you could leave it as normal or overlay works too. You just want to add a little bit of highlighted areas like this just to give it a bit more interest. You don't need to do too much of it. That's why I suggest the airbrush. And then you can go in and add hard lights here and there for it. Let's try add instead. Yeah, see, add does that. You can turn it down to about 15 or so. It just adds a little bit of interest in certain spots. There we go. Add a little bit. You can add a little bit on the shoulder, spot here. This is where you would add a little bit into the hair. Add a little bit there. This adds a little bit more interest to it. So for the hair, again, I would suggest an airbrush. Adjust how hard you need that to be. I would actually say do it on its own layer and select the color that you have for it. And select add or overlay. You could use screen too. And then just, because we've used this, we're just going to add a little bit more here to it. And we can just add in a little bit of brightness to hairline. Especially in here. And if you do it with the airbrush tool, you'll have just a bit more control. Then you can jump in there with the rather an ink brush like this and just add in hard lights. We want a little bit of harder angle or harder light to it. You just want to add a bit more interest to the overall drawing. So, and there we go. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Keep creating, come back and watch the next series of videos, and enjoy the rest of your day.